Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Tuesday, the 15th of August. I'm Aidan Macdonald and today I'm joined by Tony Haggerty. Tony, how are you?
I'm very well, Aidan. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Plenty to talk about today in terms of Celtic news, as there always is. But before we get into it, guys, for anybody that's interested, it's in the ticker tape in this video and also the podcast link if you're listening to this on demand. We'd be really appreciate it anybody that's able to subscribe to the website, support top quality journalism, covering the club you all love. As part of that, you'll get featured interviews from Tony, videos from Ryan, data analysis from Juco James, Alan Morrison, scouting reports from Stuart Ross, and also opinion pieces from myself, Tony, and Ryan. So get yourself involved in that, guys, if you haven't already. One of the articles that's went live on the website today is a piece that Tony's done on why he thinks Odin Thiago Holmes should get a sort of regular run in the first team, starting with the League Cup clash against Kilmarnock at the weekend. So you get access to content like that. It's the deal we're currently running is £4 for 4 months, and to get yourself involved, it's www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. As I say, guys, we really appreciate anybody that's able to subscribe. That allows us to do the morning briefing Monday to Friday, match reaction of the weekend, stats bomb content, and of course, the top 5 moments that Tony's obviously been involved in recently with a number of guests, of which there'll be a special one coming on Sunday. We'll not quite spoil it yet, Tony, but I think it's going to be an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the reason why the briefing's at 9:10 today. I have to go and do a 5 Celtic moments that made me with a former Celtic player. We'll narrow the field down to that then, eh? There you go. But yeah, it should be a good one. Looking forward to that. The series is proving to be pretty popular with lots of people, and we're trying to vary it up and get different kind of guests. But always the football ones they're always a great listen and a worthwhile listen. But we'll hopefully keep that going moving forward with the 5 Celtic moments that made me. But another good guest coming up.
Indeed, indeed. As Tony was saying, we are slightly earlier today, just 9:13, purely because of Tony's interview that he's conducting later on. But I think it will be worth it, Tony, when it goes live on Saturday. I believe it will be because the game's Sunday. So, yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. We might even tease it near the time. But moving on to the present, Tony, obviously the transfer news, it was kind of cutting about on a couple of sites yesterday, but it started to gain a bit of weight late last night. Reports from the Scottish Daily Mail stating that Celtic are interested in FC Nantes left back Quentin Merlin. Now he's 21 years old and he's been capped 5 times for the French under 21s. Last season he played 31 games. He's got 1 goal and 2 assists. I think there's up a title goal scored against PSG. It's been floating about on social media that people have probably seen, because it then cuts to Messi just kind of looking away in disgust. I think PSG got a bit of a one in that game, but he's currently contracted until 2026, and he signed for his current club only a couple of years ago in 2021. Now, Tony, I know it's early days. This link obviously only happened last night. Probably like myself, you've seen the clips floating about. You've maybe looked at his basic stats that are available online. If there turns out to be more weight to this, we'll of course have him scouted at some point this week or next week, and we'll be able to look into a bit more detail. But based off the sort of basic information that you have, would you be interested in this sign?
I think you've got to be interested in this signing, and I think it's like everything else. You canvass the Celtic supporters. They would say that's an area where they they need to strengthen, and there should be persons of interest. So obviously Quentin Merlin or Quentin Merlin, whatever way you want to call it. Not sure of the pronunciation yet, but he's clearly a person of interest. And if Celtic are going to firm that up with a bid, then they might have to go as high as 7 million. Lots of people saying Celtic will balk at that price. But let's remember, Christopher Jullien came from Toulouse for 7 million, didn't he? So it's not a price tag that would frighten Celtic off per se. But I just quite like the fact that, you know, clearly the recruitment team are seeing what a lot of the Celtic supporters are seeing, and obviously what the manager's seeing. Left back's an area that Celtic need strengthened in if they're going to go into the Champions League. And I'm just pleased to see that these links are coming in. I've always maintained, Aidan, right? See the clubs from like 5th to 10th in the French League, the Spanish League, the Italian League. Why can't Celtic afford their players? If you can't go to top 4 in each of these leagues, which are supposedly the most celebrated leagues out with the English Premier League, but surely teams from Celtic should be all over that. And I get they probably are, But I think there should be more. Should really concentrate. Clubs like Nantes. In the French league last season, a former sleeping giant, Saint Etienne, were relegated. Can't tell me that Celtic can't afford the best players at clubs like Saint Etienne. I'm just using them as a general rule of thumb. We should be all over that. They've had success plucking the best players from the likes of the Scandinavian leagues. So why can't they go target those leagues and say the clubs that are just out with the European spots from maybe 5th, 6th to 10th or 12th or whatever, and see what's around? Because I guarantee there'll be a calibre of player that could fit into Celtic system, no problem at all. I'm sure they are, but I just think sometimes that there's a reluctance to maybe go to these leagues because they think they might be priced out of it. Now, is 7 million for somebody like Quentin Merlin a lot of money? I guess it's a heavy financial outlay for Celtic, but he fits the model, doesn't he? 21, no, under 21 cap. So you look at that and you think, well, is this a player that can be developed? Of course it is. He helped Nantes win the League Cup, didn't he, last season, I believe? And he is an up-and-coming player. So that's the kind of ballpark price you're going to have to pay for these kind of players, then so be it. But I'm just more than interested in the fact that Celtic are now beginning to focus on target areas where they need strengthened. Obviously, Lagerbielke coming in as well. Believe he'll be in at some point today, possibly to do a medical and firm that up and conclude that, or at some point this week, to offset the loss of Starfelt. So, yeah, I think it's a position that Celtic do need covering, because as we spoke yesterday, Greg Taylor is still finding his feet under Brendan Rodgers' system. And so if a player like that can come in, say Celtic have still to firm it up with an offer, haven't they? I think there's been interest, but nothing concrete at the minute. So if they go in and if they go in and have a look at this player, and it becomes that interest becomes more than that, then I think they should think seriously about maybe trying to conclude a deal on that.
Yeah, I think in terms of the fee, Tony, it's one of those ones, like you say, you're getting a player from a top 5 league who's been heavily involved and his team featuring, goals, assists. You're going to command a fee like this in the current market. It just is what it is. Look, it wouldn't even break Celtic's transfer record. I understand some people might be saying 7 million, but in terms of like some of the prices that we be getting quoted for other guys in this window, of course it was only speculation. This is still a bit below that, so I don't think the fee, if it is between 7, 8, 9 million, that should be the barrier. It could be that maybe gets offers from elsewhere, but I think the fact you can come and offer Champions League to a player like this is another really important negotiating tactic, and another reason that it's so important that Celtic once again win the league this season, so you get the Champions League the following campaign. Don't want to look too far ahead, but we know there's a lot of clubs that can probably offer more money than Celtic can in terms of transfers or in terms of wages, but I think the fact you can maybe put together a different package for a player, that's got to be a positive, and maybe a different way to look at trying to get somebody like this in.
There's not a lot of clubs that can offer the shop window that Celtic offer, Aidan, and that is to play at the highest stage of club football, i.e. Champions League group stages. Every player aspires to be there, and every player aspires to turn out for the national team. Now, players like Merlin and others, it's a brilliant opportunity if Celtic come calling and you're working with an elite level manager who could take your career to that elite level. You'll get a taste of it with 6 games in the Champions League, and if Celtic continue their domestic dominance and win the league, then you'll get even more of it. Next season it'll be 8 games, won't it? Not looking too far ahead as you say, but that's got to be your thinking if you're a player and and you want to take that next step. And I think that's what Old and Thiago Home thought as well. It's next steps in your career progression. And Celtic, to me, at this moment in time, I've said it before, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. You come in, you get used to winning, you pick up great habits where your standard does not drop. And if anything, your standards have to be raised. Told you that about that bar, and you have to keep peaking and peaking and peaking. These are things that you learn in your football career that never leave you. It's not enough to turn up once every 3 games if you're playing for no a win, lose and draw, nobody bats an eyelid. You've got to win at Celtic. You've got to win silver. You end up with medals, and and success. That's a demand. Not every player can cope with that. But I tell you what, the ones that can love it, and they love the fact that then they go into the rarefied atmosphere of the Champions League and pit their wits against the best. Not many teams can offer that at this moment in time. Celtic can, and as you say, some guys are all about the career progression because the money will come if they believe in their talent, won't it? And I stress this: it's not as if you come to Celtic and get paid nothing. There's this kind of attitude where they're not on much at Celtic. They're getting heavily weighed in at Celtic. Not to the point where they're getting hit as heavily weighed in as English Premier League clubs, but it's a non-comparison. That's a non-starter. But they don't come to Celtic and play for nothing. They earn a right good living, a right good standard of living, and then they get to play in the Champions League and they get to see what playing at a big football club's all about. The attitude that you need, those behaviours that I talk about that you pick up where winning is everything. If you don't win, seconds nothing. Yet some guys in any other league would think second would represent some kind of success. It doesn't in Scotland. And if you're willing to put yourself in that environment, you will come out the other end a far better player, a far better person, and you'll genuinely enjoy the experience. And for a lot of footballers, it's not just about money, it's about the experience. And Celtic can offer you one hell of an experience at this moment in time under an elite level manager and the chance to play elite level football in the Champions League group stages. It's quite an attraction, Aidan.
It is indeed, Tony. I think just when I was touching on like the wages aspect, I wasn't trying to imply that Celtic players, aren't well paid.
No, I know that.
It's just the sort of clubs you'd be competing with. Say it was like a Brighton or something like that, just as an example, they would be able to offer more. But obviously, he would still be very well compensated at Celtic, and you would imagine that if he was covering for that sort of fee, he would be one of your highest paid players. But yeah, I think what you discussed there in terms of the European platform is really, really important. And obviously, you're getting somebody from a top 5 league. It may take a wee bit more convincing because they would already say, well, they do have a platform of some sort. But the Champions League is definitely a big selling point in a variety of ways, as is working with Brendan Rodgers, Tony, which is another thing Celtic have got as a negotiating tactic at the moment. So, yeah, they should be in a relatively strong position here. And I feel that if it's a player they really want, you go in and you make that bid for them. We know there's plenty of money in the bank. The money they got from the Champions League last season, the money this season, the additional money from Jota, the club themselves kind of said to the stock exchange, I think it was, that they're going to have extra fees they weren't expecting. I think we could imagine that's probably because of the Jota money. So, yeah, there's plenty there to play with, and the fans, I think, would be quite excited based off the limited kind of footage and knowledge we've got of this player. And of course, we will do a more detailed scouting report if it becomes more of a concrete link. But I think the fans would be quite happy if a guy like this was to come in. And it's not to say Taylor's finished or anything like that, of course not. But I think we can agree that he needs a bit of help, Tony. And as we've seen with James Forrest and Patrick Roberts all those years ago, during Brendan Rodgers' first spell, competition breeds success, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's nobody's got a downer on Taylor. It's just what you're seeing, what your eyes are telling you. There are certain positions that need filled at this football club. Lots of people still think they need a goalkeeper, another centre forward. I believe Neil Lennon was talking the other day, and he was talking about what I've been banging on about for ages, a big midfielder in the Victor Wanyama mould. So I don't know who's listening to who, but I think that as well. But I think we're getting to the stages of the transfer window where you will see a lot of movement. People will jockey into position, and if a club like Celtic comes calling for you in the last few days of the transfer window, you've got a big decision to make, haven't you? And you want to play. I think every player aspires to play Champions League football, don't they? And as I said before, what a shop window that is. And if Celtic ask the question of Quentin Merlin, then only he can answer that question. But I look at the likes of Odin Thiago Holmes asked the question. He said he didn't even think. Get me there. Lager Bielka started talking about the Champions League as soon as Celtic were mentioned. So it's a huge box office draw, and it's an attraction because some players just never get to experience that. And if you can, I don't say circumvent the process or circumnavigate it or short circuit it by coming to a club like Celtic and doing that very early in your career, then good on you. But come for the fact that this is a big club, and Celtic, in terms of their business, are starting to act like a big club. So I'm delighted about that, and lots of people shouting, and there's a lot of noise. They've not spent money. The money's out. What would they rather Celtic do out and frittered millions of pounds on players that turn out not to be what the manager wants? I think there's due diligence being done here. That Celtic, if they are going to spend 7, 8, 9, 10 million pounds on a player, they're bringing in the real deal. Oven ready, be the difference maker on a stage like the Champions League, because they're not being brought in to win the League Cup, are they? Let's be honest. If you're that heavy financial outlay, so guys like Jota, who were brought in for 6.5 million, and Cameron Carter-Vickers, they were brought in to win the title and get them into the Champions League. They did that. So Cameron Carter-Vickers is still here. Jota has gone, but he's gone for a massive fee. So I think there's a lot of things happening that people at the club that people certainly aren't aware of. And I give kudos to the recruitment team just now. I don't want to see Celtic fritter money away just because they've got it. I want them to really go and source players, scout them properly, do the recruitment processes properly, do their due diligence, and then bring in guys that can be, as I say, game changers in the Champions League. I've no doubt that maybe 3 or 4 players will come in before the end of this transfer window. It is a slow process and it takes time to conclude deals. But I like what I'm hearing just now with the links, certainly. And, I think it's like everything else. You look upon it, you say, well, the only disappointment maybe was maybe not getting the Croatian goalkeeper. For a lot of people who the links are there, but I think he's going to sign for Fenerbahce. But if he's not coming, then Celtic move on. You just have to move on. And if Celtic think that they need a goalkeeper, then I'm sure they'll go out and get one.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I understand what you're saying when you don't want to be fritting money away, but the only thing I would say to that is Celtic and Rodgers himself and kind of the noise that was coming out from the club was that there was going to be a lot of money to spend this summer, daring to dream for Europe and all that. And look, there's still a bit of time left in the window, so it's maybe a point I don't want to labour on too much until the window closes, and we might do a sort of squad depth video, Tony, similar to what we did just when the window opened a couple of months ago, when we'll kind of break down, and then we can maybe discuss whether or not it's been a good or not so good window. But I think at the moment, these links are encouraging, but if you do still need to bring in a goalkeeper, a defender of some sort, along with a centre-back for Carol Starfelt, replacement in my opinion, as well as also somebody in for Jota. If those 3-4 players come in, then I think a lot of people will be pretty satisfied with the business concluded. But I can also, on the flip side of what you were saying, Tony, understand some of the anxiety in the window so far, just because we know how much a step up the Champions League is, and you just want the manager and the squad to be as prepared as possible, because at the moment you have lost key players in terms of Jota, in terms of Starfelt. So I think when they get replacements in for them, along with a goalkeeper and maybe somebody like Merlin, for example, then people will be a lot more content. But I just wanted to bring up a couple of comments here. Andrew Galea, one of the commenters, comes in and says, Taylor isn't done yet, he's better than he gets credit for. Yeah, of course, as I was saying earlier on, Tony, and I know you'll echo this, we're not saying Taylor's anywhere near done, but it's good to have competition in there because he's not really being challenged by Bernabeu at the moment. Whether it's on the pitch when he does play or the issues off the field, Taylor basically knows unless he's suspended or he's injured, he's going to be almost a guaranteed start at the moment. And it's been that way, and he's in the 2 seasons under Ange as well, and he was obviously brilliant then. But I think having a bit of help won't do him any harm. Ryan obviously did the newsletter yesterday, which is available in the description of this video. It's an article that went live on the website this morning, basically talking about Celtic's current left back situation, and he must have been looking at the future because he felt they should be bringing in a new defender in that position. So the fact that they're being linked with Merlin is definitely a positive, Tony. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But in terms of the rest of the transfer business, another player that there's speculation Celtic could be potentially signing is one Ryan Fraser, He's obviously 29, played for Aberdeen. He was sensational at Bournemouth, done well for Scotland over the years before he kind of seemed to peter out there. But he's at Newcastle currently, but I don't think he's played since October last year. And it seems like he's basically completely bombed out, and Newcastle are happy to let him move on, and he probably wants to get away and play his football. What do you make of this link, Tony? He's obviously a player, a bit like some guys that kind of just seem to get linked every summer. Might be exaggerating a wee bit there, but I feel ever since he was at Aberdeen, Ryan Fraser was a player that was being linked with Celtic, and it seems to continue on during his career down south. I guess, firstly, how would you feel about him coming in? Just as individually, like nothing to do with where he'd be a replacement for Jota. And secondly, how likely do you think it would be?
Well, first and foremost, I've read a lot of negativity surrounding Ryan Fraser's potential transfer to Celtic. Which I don't like to see or read. But if I go by the manager all the time, and if the manager feels that Ryan Fraser is a player that can come in and make a difference to Celtic, then Celtic will go and get him. He is a player that seems to have been perpetually linked to kind of Stephen Fletcher type player who was always linked with Celtic during many transfer windows, and Gordon Strachan was denied the chance to go and sign him. But what would you say? He's 29?
29, Tony, yeah. And he's in February.
Yeah, so that's probably the only red flag for me, because it doesn't fit any kind of model, does it? It would be his last contract, wouldn't there be no sell-on value there? But I guess Brendan Rodgers likes his wingers, doesn't he? And if he feels that he can rejuvenate Ryan Fraser's career, it's kind of stalled, or ailing career at Newcastle, then he might certainly think he fits the bill and he can bring him in because he can do a job. So I think it's certainly a watch this space. But there has been a lot. We're all over social media and we look at these things, and lots of people saying not for them. I'm of the opinion, how do you know a player's not for you if when you've not seen them play for your club and fit into your philosophy and your system or your style? And if Celtic are interested, then I can only assume the manager's possibly interested, or it might be speculation, paper talk, whatever. But if he's a person of interest in Celtic want him, they'll go and get him. I know he's supposedly on a big wage at Celtic, might have to take some sort of wage cut. But if all those kind of loose ends can be tied up, then you might well see Ryan Fraser at Celtic. Lots of people saying he's injury prone as well. Fair enough, he has had some injury concerns, but listen, I will not dispute the judgment of any player that comes into Celtic between now and the end of the transfer window. They'll come in for a reason, I believe. Still very interested to see what Marco Tilio will bring to the party as well, in terms of wingers or wide attacking players. So we've also got him waiting to come in to the side at some point to show what he can offer. Quite like Big Yang on Sunday, what he offered as well. So yeah, I mean, there's always going to be speculation linking Celtic with players coming into the club, especially during the transfer window. There's always going to be opinions on certain players coming in. Ryan Fraser seems to have polarised and really divided opinion. I'm going to, it's kind of sitting on the fence in this one, because I think he's a decent enough player. He's performed well enough for Scotland and performed brilliantly for Bournemouth, as you say, and decently enough for Newcastle. Do I see him being a Celtic player? I'm not sure. Do I want him? I'm not sure. But if they do bring him in, then I'll concede judgment to that in terms of the management and the recruitment team and say, okay. But I'm not going to dismiss it out of hand right now, because I think it'd be churlish to do that. And these links are coming from somewhere. So Celtic might have done some due diligence on him and believe that he can fulfil some function, some role at the club. So, okay. And I know you mentioned he hasn't played since last October. So these things are potential red flags as well, aren't they? So I think this one could be a watch this space.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of caveats here. Firstly, Ryan Fraser, when he's kind of in his pomp, we know how brilliant he was. I think he had the most assists in the Premier League a couple of years ago, which, in my opinion, is a phenomenal start for a guy who was at Bournemouth at the time. He was really, really impressive in that. Really up until that COVID break with Bournemouth, and then after he came back, I think him and Eddie Howe, who of course is currently his manager at Bournemouth, they had a bit of a fallout. He basically refused to sign a contract or something, so he wasn't involved in that final, whatever it was, 8-9 games, 10 games after COVID, which then led to Bournemouth getting relegated. He then went to Newcastle, had a positive start there. Eddie Howe then comes in as his manager at Newcastle. I think he was commenting at the time saying there wasn't any bad blood between the two. I don't know if something else has happened, but there was all sorts of speculation over the last 18 months coming out about the two's relationship. And then he's then bombed out the squad pretty much. I think he was training with the under 18s or 21s or something. And yeah, he's not played competitive football, first team competitive football since October last year. So it would require kind of him getting up to speed, Tony. That's maybe one of the things that does count against him. Look, you can't not sign players who you think are going to be really good because it might take them a bit longer. I get that, but he would also have to build up his fitness, etc. He's also what was I going to say? Something else I was going to say. That's not good enough. Forget the podcast to forget that, Tony. But he is an exciting player. I think people maybe seen him for Scotland during, I think it was the last campaign qualifying for the World Cup at the start of it. Obviously, it didn't end well, but in the early stages, Fraser was very much involved, sort of playing off Dykes, playing off Adams, and he looked like he could offer a lot. Also, in a few of the games that was played behind closed doors and COVID, he looked really positive. I'm unsure what had happened over the last couple of years since then in terms of Scotland. I'm going to guess the reason he's not been involved more recently is because of the fact he's not really playing at Newcastle. There was some stuff about he was apparently turning down caps. I think it was training with Newcastle and he said he was injured or something, so he wasn't playing with Scotland. So I don't know if there could be maybe some baggage there with a player like this. I'm unsure. I wouldn't want to speculate too much on that because you'd kind of just be taking it based off managers' comments. You would need to actually see for yourself. But I think there's plenty of talent there, Tony. The only thing would be you'd maybe be looking for a sort of similar redemption arc that Brendan Rodgers had with Scott Sinclair. And there would have been an argument to be made that Scott Sinclair is maybe at a higher level than Ryan Fraser ever was in terms of his peak playing for Swansea and that. So it's an interesting one. And it maybe is one of those sort of transfers that as the window progresses and it gets nearer, we find out a wee bit more about it. But yeah, my only thing was that I do feel Celtic are linked with every window, so I feel like I've had this discussion before, but yeah, we'd still keep an eye on it.
He also ticks the homegrown box.
Yeah, good point.
For the Champions League players in your squad, if that's the way they're looking at it, and as I said earlier, I'm not for frittering money on players that can't contribute, and if somebody above my knowledge says that Ryan Fraser can contribute, then who am I to argue with that? Is it underwhelming? Is that too strong a word to see Celtic linked with Ryan Fraser? Possibly, but I'm not jumping up and down about it. I'm not wild about it, but I'm not entirely going off my nut about it. As I say, if Ryan Fraser comes in, then somebody believes he can do a job, but I don't want Ryan Fraser to come in and end up like another, say, James McCarthy and doesn't really feature, but is commanding, a top wage for not contributing much. I think, if anything, the James McCarthy situation should teach you lessons on those kind of things, and it's no James McCarthy's fault. I mean, he was offered a contract. Of course, he's going to sign it for a club that he supported growing up as a boy, but it's just not happened for James McCarthy, is it, at Celtic, and never will. So you're mindful of that, aren't you, when you see the likes of Ryan Fraser linked, these kind of things. So I'm fully aware of that, and I know it doesn't flick every Celtic supporter's switch, but these links are coming from somewhere, and if that interest is firmed up and Ryan Fraser does come to the club and someone believes that he can do a job, it's up to Ryan Fraser then to prove that he can do that job that he was brought in to do. But yeah, I'm neither up nor down about it. Other links have made me a bit more joyful and excited. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I just think I'm not sure about this one, to be honest, but I'm not going to go off my head if he comes in, and conversely, I won't go off my head if he doesn't come in.
It's a very disciplined answer, Tony. I like that.
Yeah.
You're right in what you're saying, though. But Just a comment here, just because you touched on Tallio earlier. James Hill coming in saying, where is Tallio regarding fitness? As far as we understand, based off Brendan Rodgers' I think it was his pre-match press conference before the trip to Pittodrie, he kind of confirmed that Alistair Johnson and Tallio are back out on the grass training. He's hoping to have them back by mid-September, so still a bit off, about a month away. I think that'll be another good attacking option to have when he's available. But I guess just to finish up, Tony, in terms of on Fraser, do you think something that's maybe counting against them is he could potentially be coming in, whether Celtic recognise him as a lot of fans will, as a potential replacement for Jota, who one of the most popular players in recent years, one of the most talented players. You got a big fee for him. I think he was on a big contract. Everybody was hoping he was going to be here a bit longer. Do you think that's maybe counting against Fraser more than if this was as being linked to a central midfielder, or do you think it is just that some people don't rate Ryan Fraser?
I think there's a lot of that's from people don't rate Ryan Fraser, but I think we'll bin this kind of talk of a replacement for Jota. We need a player who played in the same position as Jota. A replacement for Jota is going to be very, very hard to find. Doesn't stop you from looking for it, but I think it's very unfair to pin those kind of labels on anybody who plays out wide. They're not a replacement for Jota. They are who they are as an individual footballer, and they will maybe come in and play the same position, and that's a problem. You guys end up behind the 8 ball if they're not as good as Jota. Let's be honest, for Celtic's financial parameters and ballparks, what they spend on footballers, not going to be many players that come into the club that are going to be better than Jota either. The reason he's left for 25 million quid is because he was a bit of a player for Celtic and top draw. So, and I'm not saying that Celtic can go out and get another player of that ilk, but I think it's very unfair to sort of say, "Oh, he's come. We need to replace Jota. We need to replace the position that Jota occupied in the team. Whether we can get a player that's as good as Jota or not, then that's up to the recruitment team, isn't it? And the manager himself to see if they can get someone who can provide similar goals, similar assists, and be that excitement flair player for the club. But I hesitate to pin labels on people and say they're the new this or the new that, or they need to be a replacement. We all know there's been a void created by Jota's departure. It was always going to come to that, and it was always going to be difficult to fill. But saying things like, is Ryan Fraser going to be the man to fill the void from Jota? It's a non-starter for me, but that's just the way I look at football at times, So, and I think it'd be very unfair on Ryan Fraser, which is maybe where some of the negativity comes from. We are aware that Jota has left the club, and that position needs filled. It will be filled by whoever that may be, but we have to give them a chance. We can't be berating them for not being Jota, can we, before they've even kicked the ball for Celtic? It's unfair. But I just before we leave, I do like that expression, they're back out in the grass. It's a kind of new expression, isn't it? They're back in training. They're out there on the grass.
It's a bit vague, isn't it? It's a bit vague. Rather than they're not saying he's joining the first team training. I think it's a bit deliberately vague from the manager.
Football speak, isn't it? These guys are back out on the grass. What? Doing what? They could be back out in the grass smoking cigarettes or vaping or something. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, But I know what they mean. But I guess it's a positive sign in terms of Marco Tilly, wasn't it? That they might be doing some kind of work with the first team, and here's hoping that him and Alistair Johnson are continuing their rehabbing like Cameron Carter-Vickers are ahead of schedule and come back into the team as soon as.
It could be the grass in Kelvin Grove Park, says Robert Gibson. But yeah,
exactly.
Just before we finish up, Tony, the only thing I would say, and I know what you mean in terms of that Jota point, but I think one thing they definitely do need to replace, and look, it could be somebody at the club that already steps up, is the goals and assists. A double-double, as I believe it's known in basketball. He hit the last, Ryan's been educating on several basketball terms over the last couple of months, and I think the fact is that's what you do need to replace. Even if you maybe think we can't get somebody of that quality, I would personally disagree with the money they've got in the bank. I think that should be one of the kind of priority positions. But I know what you're saying, but undoubtedly the thing that does need to be replaced, whether it's somebody at the club already stepping up or being brought in, is that sort of 10 plus 10 goals assists a season, because that could be the difference. Where it's Europe, domestically getting a certain trophy over the line, however you want to look at it, and look, that could already be. It could already be at the club, Tony, and hopefully it is, or hopefully it's going to be somebody coming in. But even if you maybe can't get somebody to the exact same high technical standard, you're going to need a player that's to step up or come in that's chipping in with the goals and assists.
We need a player to replace the numbers, most certainly. So if you get a player that replaces the numbers, then you're getting a player kind of in that ilk, aren't you? I'm just talking about the actual player that Jota was. Celtic got Jota at a brilliant time for both player and the club, and he dazzled with his talent. But there were games where he didn't dazzle with his talent, did he? He could be ordinary in games as well, so you accept it. But yeah, you need a player to come in and produce the same numbers. But I'm being a realist here, Aidan. The Jotas of this world are very, very hard to come by and find. And if we could get another one, be great, wouldn't it? It'd be absolutely brilliant. Doesn't stop you from looking, as I'm saying, that you should be all over this and trying to. But if we can bring a player in that can replace those numbers, then you'll be getting somebody who's approximating to what went out the door. And I think that's what Celtic should be aspiring to. Not trying to find the next Jota, getting a player that can hit those same numbers, same targets, and I think that's what Celtic are looking for just now. Not Jota Mark II, the new Jota, or a replacement for Jota. Well, I want somebody to come in and contribute in terms of assists and goals the same way that Jota did, if they can.
Don't we all, Tony? Don't we all? But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today, guys. Thanks very much for joining us. Thank you for your comments. Also, slightly early today, as we say that, as we were saying at the start. Sorry, that is because Tony is recording a very special top 5 Celtic moments with a former Celtic player. Maybe we'll tease it a wee bit later in the week, but that will be going live on Saturday, I believe, Tony, with the game being on Sunday. So, yep, keep your eyes peeled for that, guys. But once again, just before we finish up, if anybody that's interested, ticker tape down below and in the description of this video and podcast if you're listening to it or watching on demand. Subscribe to the Celtic Way website, off on top quality journalism covering the club you all love. As part of that, you'll get data analysis from Duco James, Alan Morrison, feature interviews from Tony, videos from Ryan, and scouting reports from Stuart Ross. The link to do that is www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. I think the current offer is £4 for 4 months, so get yourself involved in that, guys, if you haven't already. But, Tony, until the next time, always a pleasure, mate.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in at the earlier time, guys.
Cheers, guys. We will see you tomorrow.